All right, so it is official. We got the word. Vasiliy Lomachenko is coming back end of October against Jamaine Ortiz. Now, look, we knew this time was coming. We knew that he was going to be coming back eventually. Weren't exactly sure when, wasn't exactly sure who he was going to be fighting against, but the time frame's perfect. October 15th, we're going to get the rematch between Devin Haney and Haney-Kambosos Jr. If a week or two later, we get this fight with Vasiliy Lomachenko, and he wins, and I'm sure he'll be the favorite going into this one. Jamaine Ortiz is not a big-name guy. A lot of people expect him to win. A lot of people would suggest this fight is being set up for him to win. Right? Just give him a little bit of a tune-up fight. It's not like an easy, super nice pick, but give him a little bit of a tune-up fight, get him back in people's minds, get him in front of the cameras a little bit right after the fight with Haney and Kambosos, and it just sets the stage perfectly for him to get that next one. And let's not forget, he was the one who was supposed to originally scheduled to get that fight against Kambosos. He just missed out on the opportunity because once Russia invaded Ukraine, he decided to go over there. He is Ukrainian, so that switched everything up. Devin Haney steps up. He takes the fight, wins the belt. So it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. Loma's going to come back. He's going to take this fight. He wins, and it sets the stage for that. Now, look, Jamaine Ortiz is no easy touch. Okay, he's a young guy. He is super hungry. Impressive amateur career, 100 wins, 14 losses. 2015, he was the National Golden Gloves silver medalist. 2016, he made it to the semifinal round for the Olympic trials, ends up losing to Teofimo Lopez. Right now, you may think that's the amateurs and it doesn't matter, but what it does represent is that he was facing a lot of skilled guys and he was being successful. It represents a certain level of skill. Okay, now he's coming in as a pro. He's 16-0 with 8 knockouts. Now, the first thing I think when I see 16-0 with 8 knockouts is that you don't got a lot of power. Right? And it's because 8 knockouts isn't that much, but it's also because it's that early in your career. When you're coming in earlier in your career, if you're going to be a guy who's going to be a somebody someday, typically all those early fights, you're smoking those guys, man, because they're overmatched. They're just way in over their head. You're getting stoppages. You're getting early stoppages. So when he comes in, 16-0 with 8 knockouts, not very impressive with the power department, but maybe it's enough to keep guys honest. Maybe it's enough to keep somebody off you. They're not going to be able to bully you around the ring. Right? He is going to be the bigger man in this fight, but basically everybody's bigger than Lomachenko at 135 pounds. He only moved up there for the money fights. He only moved up there for the names. He's a guy who could compete at 130 for sure, maybe even 126. I don't know. But he reminds me of Floyd Mayweather in that regard. Right? Floyd was a guy who he only moved up to 147 for the money. He only moved up and competed at 154 for money fights. Really, he was a 140-pound fighter. He could have just stayed there, planted himself in that division, and just rode that out for his whole career. And all the young guys, all the smaller guys that were coming up through the ranks year after year, they would have had to stop and fight him at 140 on the way. Problem with that is he wouldn't have got that fight with Oscar De La Hoya. And that was the major career-changing fight for him. Right? It was at that point that everything changed. So he needed that. He had to move up. I think that fight was at was it a catchweight at 152 or was it just a legit 154 fight? I don't remember 100%. I know that fight with Canelo was, I want to say that was 152. I want to say that was a catchweight. But anyways, nevertheless, it reminds me that Lomachenko didn't have to move up to 135 pounds. He's not that big of a guy. Pretty much everybody's bigger than him. Maybe Gervonta Davis isn't, but that's probably like the only guy. All right, so Jamaine Ortiz is going to be the bigger man going into this fight, but he's not going to be the more skilled man. Look, he's explosive. He's young. When you watch him fight, he's got that young guy energy. He just goes out there and he looks like he's just bouncing around a little bit. Right? He's like a coiled spring, man. Like he's just ready to go at any moment. And that's the way that he fights. He can explode and he can have these big combinations and he goes out there and he lets his hands go and he can be effective. He also leaves himself just incredibly open a lot. Hands down a lot of the time. Jumps in too much, leans in too much, reaches on some of his shots. Uses some good footwork, moves around well from the outside at times. Switches stances on occasion, right? So he does some good things decent. He's got a good jab that he works behind. He hasn't faced in his last. You look at his last fight was his most impressive fight. His last fight was his first like real kind of coming out party, big name fight. Fights the former champion in Jamel Herring. Looks good. Herring ends up retiring after the fight. Now, did he retire because of this just nasty beating he got? No. He retired because it was the end of his career. This wasn't the best Jamel Herring we've ever seen. So I hate to try to take anything away from what Ortiz did. But if we're being honest with each other, if we're evaluating stuff, if we're looking at that fight, we got to understand exactly who it is that he fought. And that wasn't the Herring that we've seen necessarily in the past. Even if you think Ortiz would have beat Herring on his best day, on his best night out of his entire career, that wasn't what happened that night. But it was a step-up fight for him. He did what he was supposed to do. He got the victory. But what we got to ask ourselves is, where does Jamel Herring rank relative to Lomachenko? And it's not anywhere near him. Right? They're not even close to being on the same level. And then you think about the fighting styles. One of the things that worked well for Ortiz is he was the mover. He was the guy who was able to kind of control the distance when he wanted to. He was the guy who was able to back Herring up. He got him on the ropes. He was able to throw combinations at times. It's going to be a tall order to do that against Lomachenko, a man who's a master of footwork, master of distance, master of using his upper body movement and slipping and just getting in spots and cutting the angles and getting in deep and spinning people and just hitting them from with shots that they don't see coming. And he's done it against guys who are incredibly impressive. Look at the resume that he's got. Now, maybe you don't consider this his most impressive win, but I really like what he did against Jorge Linares, man. I thought that was a really good one. So, you know, we saw his last two fights after that loss to Lopez. He loses the belts to Teofimo Lopez, goes out, get the surgery, stops Nakatani, goes out there, probably should have got the stoppage against Richard Comey. Do you remember that fight against Richard Comey? That was the last one that we saw Loma in. Do you remember what he did to Richard Comey, that beating he was putting on him? He's looking at Comey's corners like, are you going to stop the fight already? What are you going to do? I'm over here. I'm putting it on your boy. I'm smashing him. You know, do him a solid, man, and just throw the towel in already, because he's too proud. He's too good to stop it for himself. But this beating that I'm putting on him isn't going to be good for his career. Right? That's what he was doing to a man like Richard Comey. As you can tell, I'm a huge fan. I love what he brings to the table. I think he's incredibly skilled. I love the technical prowess that he has, the ring IQ, just the footwork, the way he makes it look almost poetic out there. Right? I think it's something special. So I'm really excited to see him back. I fully expect him to get the win in this fight and then come out and get the next title shot, which I'm also incredibly excited for. Because look, Devin Haney's going to be a huge favorite going into that fight with Kambosos. Make no mistake about it. We saw what he did in that last fight. He basically dominated it from start to finish with the jab. He wasn't forced to open up. He wasn't forced to do anything else. He's got a lot of other stuff. Devin Haney is a very skilled fighter. There's a whole lot else that he can do. Didn't even have to pull every tool out of the tool bag to give it to George Kambosos. I expect him to win the next one. Will it be as easy? Probably not. I think Kambosos is a skilled fighter. He's got some good abilities. He'll be able to make some adjustments. He'll be able to fine-tune things a little bit. He'll be able to come out, offer things a little bit different. Maybe something as simple as having a little bit better timing, coming over the top of that jab with the right hand, forcing Devin Haney to switch things up. Nevertheless, Haney's the favorite. He's probably going to win that fight if we're being honest with each other. Right? Have to lean towards him. Why am I saying that? Because think about it. That's going to give us Devin Haney versus Lomachenko. That's an awesome fight. What if we got that early next year? Like maybe, I don't know, February 2023 or something like that. March 2023. Now that would be a great fight. So let me know what you guys think about. Am I getting ahead of myself? Am I getting ahead of myself thinking about Loma versus Devin Haney already? Or is this fight versus Ortiz in the bag? Are they setting it with the perfect timetable just to build and use the PR exactly to just have people just who frothing at the mouth and they can't wait for the fight between him versus the winner versus Kambosos and Haney? Is that really what it's all about? Or is Ortiz a legitimate challenger here? Is he going to come in as a young man and shock the world? Well, maybe not shock the world, but is he going to come in and shock a lot of people with a win against Loma? Did Loma maybe miss a step with the time that he's had off? Is his mind not in the right space because of the war? Was he over there and I don't know, he gained too much weight, he wasn't eating correctly, he's not in good shape, and now he's got to cut a bunch off, or his cardio's gonna suffer? Is it gonna be a story like that? His timing won't be right. It'll be a situation where we say, hey, he got old overnight. Is that eventually gonna happen here? Is that gonna happen here? Eventually it happens to everybody. Father Time's undefeated. Is this gonna be the time that we see that from Loma? Let me know what you guys think.